Hi guys, and welcome back, and today we get on with the start of a new project, and that is with the beginning of the build for the M26 Pershing US medium tank. And this is the Tamiya kit in 1/35th scale, and I believe it has a number which is 35254, and it looks pretty good. So let's get cracking with it. This will be the first part of, I think, a two-part building series, and this one really focuses on, I guess, what you'd call the pre-build, and that's about getting some lights infrastructure installed in the tank, and also some parts manufacturing. Now, those of you who have been watching the channel for a while might remember a little animation final reveal I did of some 1/72nd scale Pershings a year or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, and that was showing the initial deployment of the Royal Haledonian Armoured as they reluctantly intervened in the German invasion of the Netherlands. So this is a call out from that period of time, and needless to say that the Pershing kit is being used as the basis for the Haledonian version of that, which of course came well before the Pershing's development. In fact, some people have been unkind enough to say that the Americans ripped off the design in late 44, and of course it really didn't get to see much action because the war finished before I think it had one run in actual combat, but I'll clarify all that as we go through the series. So yes, that displayed the unique abilities of the Haledonian version of the tank, which is affectionately known as the Dugong, and that is the Adaptive Camouflage System, the ADS, which enables the tank to effectively go into stealth mode and disappear from sight. So that's the basis of why I'm doing this. Does it make any sense to you? Probably not, but it's fun for me, and hopefully you'll enjoy the video. So a bit of a diagram of the top-down view of the tank. And I'm just marking up here where the generators and projectors for the ADS will sit, and they're fundamentally one in each corner and one on the top of the turret, which is sort of like the central control area. So I was just doing this for a reason, and that was to clearly map out the wiring requirements for the lighting system that I'm going to install, and just using some micro LEDs and a few of the 3mm LEDs as well. And in fact, we'll see further down the track that I somewhat changed my mind on the micro LEDs because they just weren't bright enough, and I decided as it was developing I wanted the ability to film the finished diorama in a nighttime lighting situation so you could really see the lights quite prominently in the final reveal. And now just using the orange highlighter to sort of sketch out where I think the wiring needs to be laid out. And all this, of course, will go on the underside of the top part of the upper hull. So firstly, just working on the on-off switch and finding a spot where I thought that would fit nicely, and that is just in that middle panel there. So as a matter of just creating a hole large enough for the actual switch itself to move backwards and forwards to turn the lights on and off, and a little bit of a tidy up to make sure it was a good fit. And then just using a little bit of stowage. So this is a resin piece of stowage that I will use on top of the rear hull to disguise the on-off switch. And just making sure that's a snug fit. I'll glue it ultimately. I don't want to glue it now because I don't want to have it on when I'm doing the painting. So that'll fit through there. The stowage will fit on top of the little switch. And it should be really simple then to turn things on and off without having any trace of how that's all happening. And using my new favourite handy dandy UV cured glue to secure the switch in place. So moving on now to the construction of the battery holder, and I'm just using plastic card to do all of this. I think this is about 2mm plastic card. And one of the challenges I had set myself, based on the experience I had with the 1/72nd scale version of doing this, was that I had wires all over the place, and joining the turret to the hull where I had the light in the turret was incredibly difficult because everything was in the lower hull, and it just made it really hard to get those connection points. So I decided this would all be upside down and built in the underneath part of the upper hull. So the battery, the wiring, and all the connection points in there. And I set myself the additional task of I didn't want to materially change any of the kit pieces so that they would still fit together without any significant modification. So that effectively meant everything had to be self-contained, and I wanted to leave myself with a very simple 2-spot soldering right at the very end when I attach the turret to the hull and the lighting is effectively done. But I also wanted to have it accessible, so you'll see as things unfold that access to replace the batteries by removing the turret is easy because the batteries are just there sitting in the underside of the upper hull. And as we even get further into it, the batteries that go into the turret are also there, easily accessible in the open section of the upper hull. So that was the theory, and it was just then a matter of working my way through the construction of it. So a lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. I think a bit of music might be in order because you'll hear a lot of my voice droning on throughout this video, and I'll pop in on occasions where necessary. Now, I used a few different wires along the way while I was building this, but in particular I used this brass wire because it was quite firm and springy, and I needed it to use the spring, so there was upward pressure on the battery to make sure it made good connection with the terminal point above. So the batteries fit in. I've got the wire on so the positive out is the brass wire on the bottom. And I just had to make something that I could open, so I could change the batteries if I need to change the batteries, and just pirated a couple of little screws testing to make sure it's all got good connection, which it has, and that was a pretty satisfactory experience. So it worked more or less as I had imagined. This is the on-off switch for the upper hull lighting, the 4 in the corner and the 1 on the turret, and just wanted to trim down the actual size of the switch so I could conceal it underneath a piece of stowage. And then before gluing it in place, just doing some pre-connections of the wiring. And now while I was doing this, I was also thinking about what else I would like. And I've thought of this since I built the Panther G, because that kit, the steel wheel Tamiya version, came with an infrared night viewer. And I thought, well, the Haladonian forces would have all that sort of high-tech stuff well into the early 30s, so well before anyone else had it. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could actually use the micro LEDs to light up the infrared and the spotlight? So the next bit is about stealing those parts from the Panther kit and wiring them up as well. This was very fiddly work and quite tricky, but I am really, really pleased with the results. I had to have a couple of goes at it, to be honest, and I'll share some of my failures with you a little bit further along, but by and large, I'm pretty happy about what I managed to achieve. Now, it's important at this stage that I put in a public health warning, and that's about a hidden danger in the household that I don't think many people are aware of. And the dangerous thing that exists is the clothes dryer. I have to do this because there are some graphic images that are about to follow, and I don't want anyone to be upset. So at the time of recording this, it's 22 days since my last video, and I've been really proud of myself over the first few months of lockdown here, because I'd managed to get a video out every week, and I was trying to keep that going. Part of the problem was that our clothes dryer started making a bizarre noise, which finally roused me from my lethargy to go and have a look at it, and that resulted in taking the back of it off to find that the drive shaft had shifted and thrown a nut, and it was a bit of a mess. But in my stupidity, I thought I could fix that, because I'm a modeler and I can fix anything. And as you can see, the back of the barrel is like a giant cheese grater. So I tried to lift the barrel with my left hand whilst repositioning the spindle with my right, and something moved and the barrel dropped, and I effectively sliced the tops off 3 of my fingers. And here they are about 7 days after the initial accident. So the very large bandages off, and just a few layers of band-aids to stop some seepage, but still relatively useless in terms of holding things to model. So I tell you all this for a couple of reasons. One, beware the clothes dryer, and gentlemen, don't go near them. Just pretend you can't hear the noise that your wife or your partner's hearing, and you'll be a lot safer. 2, I often film videos out of sequence. As I'm waiting for one bit to dry or cure, I'll go on and do something else. So you might see a random selection of different band-aid situations on my left hand. I'm not a time traveler. They are just filmed out of sequence. And 3, I reckon in the 22 days since my last video, I've had 6 effective modelling days. So all things being equal, I'm probably okay. What you will see further on in the video is the stuff that I tried to do when I only really had my right hand. I wasn't happy with by the time my left hand had come back into service, and effectively redid it again. And what had taken me a week to do with one hand, I got completely redone in a day. But I didn't think it was worth boring you with the filming of all of that. So let's move on. And again, as I say, watch the dryer. So just using the little Dremel now with a burr to thin out the night vision scope and make the end wide enough to accept the little 3mm LED, and just testing, and that works really nicely. And this is what I was hoping to get, that the beam would be strong enough, and that's why I stopped using the micro LEDs, to actually carry some distance. And I think that might make for some interesting filming when the diorama is completed and the turret's rotating around the scene and lighting it up as we go. So that's my vision. We'll have to wait till the end of the series to see if that proves to have worked. And here I've just made a flat base because this part of the turret's angled, so the night vision scope wasn't sitting perfectly. A little bit of 2mm plastic card and a map pin to hold it in place, and then some of the epoxy putty to fill the gaps underneath. I was very happy with the way that turned out, actually. And now just using a smaller on-off switch to get the lights set up for the turret lights, the infrared vision and just the normal spotlight. And just a few pictures now, rather than bore you with the whole repeating the process over. Once my fingers were back in working order, wasn't happy with the way things looked. It was a bit untidy and a bit messy, and the lighting was not reliable, so I had some cross wires or something. So anyway, stripped it all out, redid it. These are some shots of what the new improved Mark II version looks like. So we'll just have a look at making of some of the parts, and you've seen glimpses of them through the first part. And this was just creating a little casting box for what I wanted to be the transparent part of the adaptive camouflage system. So the light will come up from underneath these to highlight it. So this is just blue tack in a plastic card box, and after racking my brains about how I wanted to produce these things, and originally I was just going to stick a pencil in and have sort of like a pointy cylinder display, I thought I'd use my little Phillips head screwdrivers because I had enough of them to do one mould and then one pour and get everything that I needed. So this is all pretty straightforward. Put a little bit of ASMR music on, I think is the term people use, and you can watch how this unfolds. So there we end up with a very nice tidy silicon mould, and I've got my 5 impressions in there. And it's picked up the detail quite well. You can see the head of the Phillips head right down the bottom of the mould. And now just doing the casting, and here I'm using a product called Easy Cast Clear, and that's a 2-part allegedly transparent water clear resin. Supposedly has a work time of 9 minutes and a cure demold time of 30 minutes. The work time I've experienced, and this will all be due to climatic conditions, temperature in the room and humidity and all that sort of stuff, but I don't get 9 minutes work time. It tends to go off a lot quicker than that, maybe 5 at best. And the demold time is a lot longer than 30 minutes. I tend to leave this for 24 hours just to be sure. In here I've just dropped a little bit of French blue, just 1 drop in amongst a whole lot. A little bit goes a long way in this stuff, and that's just to give a tinge to the projectors that will ultimately sit into the tank for the adaptive camouflage. And blue being the primary colour because the power source for everything that's powered in Halidonia is valenium, and that is a mineral that can generate a blue aura. Very, very mysterious. So it's important to try and get the bubbles out before things start going off and curing. So I use a combination of vibrating and tapping the mould or bumping the table rhythmically, a cocktail stick, my X-Acto blade, whatever I can to try and minimise them. In an ideal world, I'd have a vacuum chamber and you would get the air out through that, but that's a bit sophisticated for where I am at the moment, but maybe one day in the future. And I always have a spare mould standing by because you are better off making more of the resin than less. So if I've got any surplus, I'll just pour it into the spare mould. And this is one of just some crates, and it doesn't really worry me how much of it I get. As long as I get the surface, I can potentially use that somewhere else in the future. Now, I wasn't delighted with the first lot of clear parts that came out, so I thought there was a little bit of failure towards the end and that tip of the Phillips head screwdriver impression. So I thought I'd use a syringe and do my very cheap version of injection moulding. And whilst this doesn't look all that impressive, because it looks like, well, you're just getting it in there and it's not really doing much more than pouring it in. I'm not sure if I actually caught this on film or not, but I then, once it was all in, went back with the syringe and drew some out and pushed it back in, and drew some out and pushed it back in. And I did that a couple of times. That seemed to have a really good effect. Certainly the coverage was excellent and very few air bubbles, so very pleasing. That worked quite well. So this is the demoulding of the second lot, the injection moulded ones. Really, really happy with how they came out. I thought they were really good. So heading into the home straight now and just making a frame for the generator unit that powers the adaptive camouflage system on the 4 corners and on the hull. And then using the 2-part epoxy putty to fill that frame up and build up the substance. So this is going to be the blank that I'll mould, because there's no way I could sculpt or build 5 units identically. So I thought I'll just build one and then I'll cast the 5 units and they should all be fairly similar. But first of all, I just wanted to get the blank because that needs to have a little bit of detail work added to it before I create the mould. And then I just detailed up the master with some little knobs and dials and bells and whistles and handles and what have you, and then created a second mould of that detailed up one, which is no point showing that. You've seen me cast way too much stuff so far. And then they were pretty much done. Of course, what I've now come to understand when I've been putting the video together is trying to film white is very challenging. You can't see anything, so I quickly did another casting with some grey paint in the resin, just so you could get a better understanding of what it looks like. And when I say quickly, I really mean quickly, so the fidelity on these is nowhere near as good as it is on the white ones. And hopefully that will show through when the painting is done and I can detail them up nicely. But all in all, I've got 5 units that all look the same, and I'm reasonably happy with that. And the last bit of casting that I did was the glass plate for the spotlight and the infrared light, and these are the 2 plastic parts from the Tamiya kit. And again, quickly made a little mould for that, cast those in clear resin, and you've actually seen them already when I was showing the wiring for the infrared stuff, but they came out really well. And then the very last thing I did was to pre-solder the leads onto the back of the LED in the turret, so that I wasn't mucking around with that towards the end, and theoretically should be able to just solder the other 2 in and close the turret effortlessly. And so that's it. So here's the upper hull with all the bits in place without the actual projectors, the clear parts, and the underside with the tidied up wiring. The turret, I've got mascal on the 2 clear parts to protect them when we start painting, and the underside there, which is a lot tidier than it was. And there they are together, so they're all separate individual parts. Basically I throw them back into the box and then we'll start building the kit happily tomorrow. We'll start putting some glue on plastic and they will just come together as the instructions unfold. So I think I achieved my goal. Everything works. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting stuck into the building proper now, and hope you will follow along to watch that as well. So that's it, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching. Much appreciated. Like if you liked, subscribe if you're not already subscribed so you can keep up to date with the new releases. Share, and of course, look forward to your comments. So take care, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next one, which hopefully won't be as long between drinks as this one was. Take care. Bye.